You might be wondering, Tim, you don't often make videos about neo-Nazis and other far-right extremists. I don't even know if right actually makes sense because left and right colloquially are kind of, whatever. And there's a reason for it. It doesn't really happen that often. And I do. It's really fascinating to me how people are like, Tim, you only rag on the left. And I'm like, I literally made a video where I called Republicans too stupid to deal with social media. The issue is that Republicans are doing what they always do. The average Republican is not responsible for what the acts of these people do. These are fringe elements. And the average leftist isn't responsible for what the far left is doing. The only issue is many left-wing journalists are praising the behavior and calling for it. So hence I'll call them out. And the Democrats, I think, are just in a tailspin and doing awful things. But here's our story, our final story for the day. 4 members of a neo-Nazi street gang have been indicted for sparking violence at political rallies. Authorities describe the California-based Rise Above movement as a combat-ready militant group of new nationalist white supremacy identity movement. Here's my problem. Okay? When you cry fascist over and over again, and white supremacist, I don't know if this is true or not. Because I literally had someone call me a secret fash today. And they're claiming, there's some weird thing going around, people are accusing me of being a Proud Boy or whatever, and it's like, dude, I know like 3 Proud Boys, and you're like, it's just absolute nonsense. If these people are going to claim that people I know to not be white nationalists are, and it makes it really difficult for me to sift through this stuff, and maybe that's the point. I made a joke the other day that it feels like the far-right elements infiltrated the left to make it, to like destroy their ideas, make them look silly, and scream fascist over and over again so you can't actually find who the real fascists are. But here's what today's video, the point is. They're indicted for sparking violence at political rallies. And I recognize this mask, and I believe some of these people, it says, Rise Above movement members wrestle a banner away from an anti-fascist protester April 15, 2017 in Berkeley, California. I believe I was there in April. I can't remember the exact dates that I went to, but I recognize some of these guys, and I can tell you straight up, I believe it was the guy on the left. He went up to me, I believe it may have been him, may have been this guy. One of them went up to me and said, which side are you on? And I said, what? And he said, which side are you on? I said, neither. And then he turned, jumped over the orange barricade, and punched an Antifa guy right in the face. And I talked about this at the time, and as much as the left likes to claim, oh, Tim doesn't call out both sides, I absolutely talked about it. And I said, no one is innocent. And what's funny is the moderates agreed. They're like, we get it, Tim. Like, we saw what happened. We watched your live stream. We know there were people like this punching people. We've seen the footage. That's not to say that the conflict was started by them, necessarily. Antifa showed up, tore the barricades down, got in people's faces, and fighting broke out. And they started some of the scuffles there and after, right? That doesn't make them innocent, by no means. These people were jumping in and punching people, and now we can see they're being indicted. So let's see what they have to say. It's from BuzzFeed News. A federal grand jury in Los Angeles indicted 4 members of a neo-Nazi gang organization for planning and engaging in riots at political rallies across California, the Justice Department announced Thursday. The men are part of the Rise Above movement, which is based in Southern California and prides itself on operating like a neo-Nazi fight club, training and priming its members to incite violence at rallies while spreading extremist ideologies through social media channels and a clothing company. One of the biggest issues that I have is that this group is relatively small and fringy and in no way operates any way like Antifa does. The Antifa groups tend to be much bigger and have support from the media, so you hear about them a lot more, and it's much easier to talk about, hey, here's what happened. When it comes to a group like Rise Above, I honestly know very little about them because these groups tend to be small and, well, fringy. I don't know how many, they're saying that I believe 4 people were indicted. Out of the group going around playing these things, they got 4 people, right? We've seen more Proud Boys arrested than that. RAM represented itself publicly as a combat-ready militant group of a new nationalist white supremacy and identity movement, federal prosecutor said in the indictment. But here's an important distinction. Feds don't go after people unless they know they'll win. They know they will win. The federal conviction rate is something ridiculously high, like 95%, which means the feds typically know they have this in the bag when they go after it. And I'll say this. I'm not a big fan of the federal government in terms of their enforcement and how they've gone after the hacker community, so I don't necessarily trust them. But what I can say is from what I've seen, it's not so much that they force people into convictions other than they have their the I's dotted and their T's crossed. So, I mean, if the feds are saying this, there you go. I don't know if there's a counter source, but if that's what they were doing, that's what they're indicted for. I'll leave it innocent until proven guilty, but for the time being, the feds typically, like I said, Robert Rundo, who allegedly founded RAM, along with 3 core members, Robert Bowman, Tyler Lobb, and Aaron Eason, are all in federal custody and are currently being held without bond. All 4 are facing conspiracy charges. Federal prosecutors also charged Rundo, Bowman, and Easton with 1 count of rioting. In social media posts and promotional videos, the group highlights its dedication to clean living, training hard, and preserving a pure European identity. With American flag bandanas tied around their faces, young white men are boxing, doing sit-ups, and promoting their nationalist clothing style. In the indictment, officials accuse the men of participating in hand-to-hand and other combat training and traveling to rallies across California to intentionally start fights and incite violence with counter-protesters and others, specifically citing brawls last year in Huntington Beach, Berkeley, and San Bernardino. And again, I'm going to state, I saw one of these guys wearing one of these skull masks jump the barricade and just punch an Antifa guy in the face. Plain and simple. You know, and at the time, again, people even who are in the MAGA hats recognized it. One of the biggest problems when it comes to dealing with violence is that people will associate this group with your run-of-the-mill Trump supporters. The way I explain it to people is that if you're in the middle, you look to your left, you look to your right, you see regular people, cool people. I look to my right, and the center-right people are kind of just, you know, sipping a beer, wearing glasses, saying, you know, they like the president. And I'm like, okay. I look to my left and I see like moderate Democrats who are kind of like, at this point, they're kind of exhausted. They're called the exhausted majority. And for the most part, they're telling me they're concerned, they're scared, and they don't know what to do because of the rampant authoritarianism and identitarianism. This is what I see. This is what I see. And that's why I draw extreme concern with the left. Behind the people on the center-right, you have the more extreme factions of ultranationalism and white nationalism, but they're far away. But here's what happens to those on the left. When they look to the right, they see the people standing, they see the Trump supporters, and then they see this movement standing behind them. And everyone associates them with the same group. And the same is true for the right when they look left. You see, you know, moderate leftists, but then you see Antifa and other groups behind them. The main issue I have is that I would be willing to bet $100. You know, I don't got all the money in the world. $100 says your average run-of-the-mill Trump supporter will absolutely denounce and despise and detest this group and say, these are bad dudes. These are bad dudes who shouldn't be going around starting fights because people have a right to free speech. However, how many Twitter personalities took to Twitter and created the worldwide trend of punch a Nazi? Because they were calling all Trump supporters Nazis. When people go on Twitter, Huffington Post journalists, and say Tim Pool is a secret fash and just mock me all day, right, that's the problem. You won't call out the fringe elements of the left because they've infiltrated the mainstream left. There are very few Democrats who are willing to address this. When you look at the Democratic Socialists of America, they tend to be very cordial, personable, and professional. And I can respect them for that because they've been willing to do interviews with me, and they were very polite about it. It was actually very nice. But they do believe in far left fringy things, and they refused to call out Antifa when I asked them. I was in Boston, and I asked the DSA guy, look, you've got a bunch of dudes wearing black masks, carrying crowbars and bats. Will you disavow this? And he said, no, they protect us. Okay. I assure you, your run-of-the-mill Trump supporter is going to say these people are bad people, and that's the big challenge. And like so when a moderate individual, center-left individual, kind of an independent, sees the conservative saying, "Dude, listen, we don't like these people," will call them out. In fact, the Trump supporters held an event in D.C. and then Richard Spencer had to hold a separate event, or I think Spencer was holding an event and they formed a separate event because they don't like him. The left doesn't do that. The left had Antifa there, they had a Soviet flag there, and the DSA absolutely denounced the Soviet flag for sure, but refused to say the black-clad violent extremists who were carrying weapons were a bad thing. And therein lies the problem for me. They say, in March last year, several members attended the MAGA rally in Huntington Beach where they attacked counter-protesters and reporters, the FBI said. A few weeks later, they traveled to Berkeley for a Patriots Day free speech demonstration where Rundo, Roman, and Eason were involved in violent attacks, and the RAM leader was arrested for punching a defenseless person, and a Berkeley police officer prosecutors detailed. Then in June, Rundo and other RAM members went to an anti-Islamic law rally in San Bernardino, where they also allegedly sparked brawls. This stuff happens. And these people are associated with the far right because my understanding is they're ultranationalists. Is that what they claim? New nationalist white supremacy and identity movement. So what's really interesting is that they're identitarians, okay? And that means they're not too dissimilar from the identitarian left. And as I explained in one of the videos I made today, the right has no problem calling this out, and I can respect them for that. I disagree with the right on a lot of issues. I'm not a conservative. I disagree with a lot of conservative positions, and I find myself more in favor of progressive values and social liberalism, but I don't like racists and I don't like identitarians. So these people to me stand out no different than the identitarian left. But make no mistake, they indicted 4 of them. This is not a very, very large group. They are not in the news enough for me to constantly be concerned about it. And although Trump has said things that I think are extremely ignorant and show his what's the right word? He doesn't watch enough news, to say the least. When he said there were very fine people on both sides in Charlottesville, I said that was dumb and a huge mistake, but I don't believe that Trump understands what he's talking about. You can't simultaneously believe that Trump is a moron and that Trump has a secret plan. It's one or the other. And I think Trump assumed Charlottesville was like Berkeley. Okay? The issue is, are there very fine people on all sides? Come on, man. If you want to get nuanced, you can claim the one guy, the handful of people who didn't know what they were getting into are fine people. I think Trump made a mistake in that regard. But the point is, most Trump supporters will point to this and say no. Most people on the left will point to Antifa and say, but why not? And this is the problem for me. And this is why I'm concerned with the climate of the culture war and the left. I think maybe in a couple days or maybe tomorrow I'll make a full video outlining a ton of my political positions, because I did a little bit of that today. But they're almost entirely center-left libertarian. I just don't like the ideology of racism, which is becoming prevalent among the mainstream left. Now Google employs advocating for race-based policy. It's wrong. It's wrong for them to do it. It's wrong for the left to do it. Thank you to the average Trump supporter who would call it out. And mainstream left, start calling out identitarianism on the left. They won't do it. Anyway, there you go. Thanks for hanging out. I'll have more videos up tomorrow on the main channel, youtube.com/Timcast. Yes, that is my main channel. This is Timcast News. I'll see you then.